for joining us today. The Our Driving Concern Employer Traffic Safety Program is pleased to be able to offer the webinar titled Before the Journey, Tips for Making Sure You and Your Vehicle Are Prepared. I want to welcome our presenter this afternoon, Karen Puckett. Karen is the Director of Workplace Safety with the Texas Department of Insurance, Division of Workers' Compensation. A few things to note before we get started. Everyone is muted, but you do have the ability to type questions during the webinar. All slides will be available. If you would like the slides, please request them in the notes section or post-event survey. The presenter may answer your question during the presentation or choose to address questions at the end. If you should encounter any problems or issues, please type a message to let us know. The presenter and the Our Driving Concerns Program Manager's contact information will be available on the last slide. There is a very brief post-event survey at the conclusion of the webinar. Because this program is funded through grant dollars and provided at no cost to employers, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. So with that, I welcome Karen and we'll turn it over to her to begin. Karen, are you speaking?
Yes, okay. I think I'm good. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Right,
I appreciate the introduction. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're going to talk a little bit about preparing for driving, both things that employers should consider if they've got employees driving for them and things that employees specifically should be doing themselves. So what we want to talk about today is what those pre-trip considerations are, and we'll talk a little bit about emergency planning, things to do and to have in the vehicle and to think about ahead of time, just so you're prepared for emergencies if they occur when somebody's driving for work. Of course, you know, motor vehicle crashes cost Americans a lot of money. These are some figures about lost productivity, property damage, things that are important considerations for employers, because if somebody gets hurt in a crash or a crash occurs, even if they don't get hurt, there are a lot of costs associated with that. So we want to try to mitigate those risks and those hazards in the workplace so that businesses can enjoy a profit instead of trying to pay claims or repairs on vehicles and that sort of thing. We're focusing on transportation as a serious occupational hazard because a lot of people in different occupations have to drive for work, and it's it's probably one of the most hazardous things, most dangerous things they're going to do at any time in their employment. Just really briefly, if you've participated in any of our webinars before, you've seen similar data to this, but almost half of the fatal occupational injuries in Texas involve transportation incidents, and almost about 3,300 non-fatal crashes result in lost work time. So it's a serious issue, and we want employers to explore different ways to try to keep people from getting hurt or property damage when people are driving. One of the really important things to think about before employees even get on the road or when you're trying to figure out your business practices is there a way to accomplish what you need to accomplish for your business without putting an employee behind the wheel at all? Is there a remote way to do what you need to do? Now that question is often answered with no, there's no other way for us to do that. So when you absolutely have to have somebody driving to accomplish your business needs, think ahead of time about what's the safest way that we can make this for our employees and determining, what route they're going to take, what time of day they're going to be driving, what kind of vehicle are they going to be in, and what other things are they going to encounter in the environment. It's just a little extra planning on the front end can really help prevent disaster in the back end. We do advise that employees check road conditions to see where construction is happening, if there are closures or crashes that have occurred that could affect their journey, to maybe search for a different route. There are a lot of areas in different communities that are known to be hazardous or known to be dangerous, where crashes commonly occur, and it's really a good idea to try to avoid those areas if possible. A lot of times you can contact your local law enforcement, and they can tell you where most of the crashes occur in your community at any given time of day. And maybe you can try to get your drivers where they need to go by avoiding those particular parts of your community. We also think it's important for employers and employees to talk about where they're going, share the itinerary so you know what to expect, when to expect them to reach their destination. A lot of companies and employees use navigation systems to try to get them where they need to go, and it's best to, if you're going to use those kinds of systems, to enter all the information before you actually start moving in your vehicle, and use the audible function on those systems so that you're not having to look down and look at where you need to go. It's telling you where to go. That's a very good function in those systems, very helpful. There are also systems that help you navigate around traffic jams, but again, you want to try to use those systems and manipulate them when you're not driving or moving in the vehicle. Just the bottom line is the shortest way to get where you need to go for your business may not be the fastest or the safest way to go. This is a picture of Austin, and this is what we deal with every day, and there are a lot of communities in our state that face this same challenge. So just think about the best ways to get people where they need to go. You certainly want to make sure that your employees are familiar with the vehicles they're going to be driving, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in more detail, but different types of vehicles handle differently. A vehicle you might be having them drive for work might be way different from their personal vehicle, or it might be a commercial vehicle, which obviously they have to have a special license to drive that, but just make sure, don't assume that your employees know how to drive a particular company vehicle if it's really dissimilar from their personal vehicle or what they're used to driving. If you are providing vehicles for your employees, you definitely want to have a vehicle maintenance program. You don't want a poorly maintained vehicle to be the cause of a crash, not only for your employee safety and protecting your investment in your fleet vehicle, but also for your liability. So you want to make sure you have a maintenance program that is going to help you monitor the condition of your vehicles. Some of the things we're going to talk about as we go through the sort of pre-trip inspections and stuff, I want you to think about the fact that not every employee is familiar with the mechanics of a car. There are a lot of research out there that shows that younger people are not necessarily driving as much. They are opting to take mass transportation or ride-sharing services rather than driving themselves. So they might not be familiar with how a car is supposed to operate, or as familiar as somebody who's a more seasoned driver. So just keep those kinds of things in mind, and don't, when you're assigning a responsibility to somebody to check a vehicle and make sure it's in good condition, that they fully understand what they're supposed to be looking for. The Department of Transportation has very concise requirements for commercial vehicles in terms of their maintenance and safety, and so we're not going to get into those commercial vehicle requirements. We're really just talking about non-DOT vehicles today. We recommend that they be inspected at least weekly. There are some things to look at on a weekly basis, and then we'll talk about some things that they should look at on a daily basis, you know, when a trip, anytime a trip occurs. Whenever you're performing vehicle inspections, make sure you're using a checklist so everything that you want to be addressed gets addressed and documented. And make sure you keep record of those reports. We recommend, you know, 6 months to a year that you keep them, maybe for the life of the vehicle if you want, just to make sure that you're covering all your bases and you've got that documentation in case you ever need it in the future. Some things to look at before, when you're doing these vehicle inspections, you want to check all the fluids and make sure they're where they need to be. And again, don't assume that the person doing the check knows what the fluid levels should be. I mean, you should either have a professional do it or make sure that they're familiar with what the levels should be. Check the belts for tightness, see if there are any leaks, obvious leaks happening on the vehicle. Before an employee actually goes out on a trip, this is something that you should look at on a daily basis probably. When they're starting the vehicle, make sure the parking brake's working and, you know, the gears are shifting properly. Look for anything that looks or sounds unusual. Make sure they're looking at the dashboard instrument panel, that all the gauges and everything appear to be normal, and, you know, watch for any warning lights or anything that might be showing up. And it's really important to keep the vehicle manuals, the user manuals in the vehicles themselves, in the glove compartment. So, you know, there are a lot of standard warning lights that happen, but technology's changed pretty rapidly in vehicles, and somebody might see something on the dash that they're not familiar with. So be sure you keep those manuals in the glove compartment so they can check those out and troubleshoot. Here are more controls you want to look at, making sure that they're working properly. One thing, you know, it's really bad when you're in the middle of a rainstorm and your windshield wipers aren't the best. You know, they need to be replaced and they're not really doing the right job for you and keeping the water off the windshield. And wiper fluid's important too in case of dust or bugs or whatever. You don't want to find out when your vision's already obscured that you're out of wiper fluid. So these are things just to check, put on your checklist, and make sure that you're looking at that all these things are working properly, because they're meant to make sure the vehicle is safely operated. A really important point is if you have the employees who are renting vehicles to drive for work, that they're making themselves familiar with how that vehicle operates, because it's going to be a vehicle that's new to them most likely. So for any of you, everybody's probably rented a vehicle, you know you do the walk around with the rental company employee to see if there are any dents or dings or scratches, because you don't want to be liable for those. But it's a good time also to look at the tire condition and look at the lights and make sure that they're all clean and none of the lenses are broken. Look at the windshield wipers. You definitely want to make sure that you're paying attention to more than just those scratches and dings when you're doing the walk around. Pardon me. Another thing employees should familiarize themselves with are the controls of the vehicle. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of changing technologies in vehicles and a lot of systems that are in newer vehicles that are meant to help. employee or people that are driving to alert them to different hazards. You know, if you're drifting out of your lane or if there's a vehicle next to you, there are different ways for the vehicle to alert you to that. A lot of them have some sort of digital instrument panel, you know, outside of the normal dashboard controls. So you definitely want employees and train them and tell them you expect them to familiarize themselves with the vehicle before they get on the road, because you don't want to be trying to figure that out while you're behind the wheel in traffic. And I do recommend that employees who are renting vehicles allow extra time for travel when they pick up the vehicle, because if there's something, if they see something mechanically wrong with the vehicle, pardon me, during their check, then they will have more time to switch the vehicle out with the car rental company and not be pressed for time and feel that they need to just get on the road because they've got a mission to accomplish for you. Other things to look at are, you know, checking the mirrors and windshield for dirt and cracks. And I know here in Central Texas, we've had a lot of rain and stuff this winter, and there's, on my personal vehicle, a lot of dirt built up on the not only on the windshield but on the back window that can obscure vision. So, you know, you don't want to wash your vehicle frequently because of the bad weather, but you need to make sure that those windows are clear so you get a clear view, and also make sure that the backup camera lens is clean as well. If employees are going to be relying on those when they're driving, that it's able to show them what it's meant to show them behind the vehicle. It can get obscured really quickly by dirt and debris. You want to make sure that people are checking, make sure they have emergency equipment in the vehicle. If you're providing fleet vehicles, you probably want to have spare fuses, some reflective triangles in case they break down on the side of the road, and a fire extinguisher. Apologize, allergies. Other things that you could consider having in the vehicle would be tire changing equipment, emergency numbers, and of course an accident reporting kit. So if your company has a requirement, and you should, for employees to report an incident if it occurs in the vehicle, go ahead and have that paperwork in the vehicle so that they can start working it out and documenting things while it's fresh on their mind. Other things to keep in the vehicle would be battery cables in case they have a dead battery, a first aid kit, flashlight with extra batteries, a basic toolkit like pliers, wrench, and a screwdriver. Recommend they bring their cell phone charger with them. And if you have employees traveling long distances, there are other things that you might want to consider adding to an emergency kit, like extra water if it's cold. You know, we're heading into spring, but in the winter, maybe a blanket or something for warmth, food that won't spoil, cat litter or sand so that they can get traction, those kinds of things. If employees are going to be traveling really long distances, it might be helpful if they break down somewhere. I mentioned fire extinguishers, and just be sure if you have fire extinguishers in your vehicle and you expect employees to use them, that they are trained on using a fire extinguisher. The federal OSHA does require that employees be trained on fire extinguishers annually if you fall under OSHA's regulations. Other things to look at in your walk-around inspection before you get on the road. Make sure all your flashers and everything are working. A lot of vehicles might give you some indicator when a bulb is out, but you definitely want to make sure those are all working. I'm not going to read this list, but basically these are all things that you should be considering and making sure that they're in good condition on your vehicles. Now, that being said, if you have employees that are driving their own vehicles for you for work, it's something you need to think about. What are the conditions of their vehicles that they're driving, and how are they being maintained? And what kind of, it's something you might want to talk to your attorney about. Is it better for us to provide vehicles, or if we have them driving their own vehicles, what should we expect of them in terms of vehicle maintenance? Should we expect to see some documentation on that? Should we, as the employer, check those vehicles out and look and do a vehicle inspection of those to see if they're in good working condition? Just because again, you can run into some liability issues if they get in a crash on the job for you, but they're in their own vehicle. You just need to think about what the liability implications might be for that. Some other things to think about before you get on the road would be checking the weather forecast. Obviously, we know that inclement weather can affect both the performance of the person and the vehicle itself. A lot of severe weather can impair your vision. You can't see as well, and it can affect the road conditions, and it can affect how the vehicle handles, especially if it's wet. Hydroplaning could happen, or if it's icy, that's slick. So just to make sure that employees are checking, especially if they're traveling some distance from where they're going, from where their home base is, that they know what to expect when they are on that journey. And again, maybe you change the travel plans or the itinerary to go around foul weather if possible. Again, as I mentioned, roads can be really different depending on the weather conditions. So it's very important to understand and be prepared for those things. Flooding, obviously, is a big danger, too. We have a lot of flash flooding here in central Texas and in other parts of the state, so you want employees to be aware of potential flooding conditions and train them to never drive through water across the road, because you never know really how deep it is unless you're extremely familiar with the roadway. But it's not worth losing your life or risking the life of emergency personnel trying to get through water just to get the job accomplished. It's not worth it. Again, if you have employees driving at night, roadways look very different at night. A lot of people have more trouble seeing at night. Dusk is a particularly difficult time of day. Early morning and at dusk, when the sun is rising and the sun is setting, those are very difficult times for even people with perfect vision to see. So those are times to be extra vigilant when you're driving. And I see a lot of people driving at dusk without their headlights on, and I think maybe they forget to turn them on, or they don't realize how helpful it is to other drivers to have those lights on so that they can be seen. So encourage employees to use the automatic headlight switch or setting on their vehicle if that's available, so they don't have to think about it and they won't forget to put their headlights on. The weather conditions I mentioned earlier can cause changes in roadways. They can cause ice or flooding, could cause actual change in the infrastructure and cause potholes or wash out roads. So it's really important to be aware when those severe weather patterns have happened, so it could affect the journey going forward, even if the storm has passed. Some important numbers to keep in the vehicles would be the supervisor or dispatch contact information for your company. On the back of every Texas driver's license, there's this 800 number, 525-5555, and that is for people to report unsafe motorists, but they can also contact this number if they have need roadside assistance. If they have, their car has broken down or there's an emergency. If there's an emergency, they should call 911. But if it's a non-emergency and they just need help, they can call this number, and the Department of Public Safety will dispatch somebody from the local jurisdiction to help them. They can also call 377. There are several cell phone providers that, let's see, Alltel, Nextel, AT&T Singular, Verizon, Sprint, US Cellular, and T-Mobile all have agreements with the Texas Department of Public Safety where you can dial star 377, and so the star has to be first in front of there, and they can report non-emergency situations that way as well. And then another good resource to have in the vehicle is the Department of Transportation's 800 number where people can call and check road conditions. They can do it online as well, but sometimes it's, preferable to call and actually talk to a person instead of trying to figure it out online. So those are good resources to have for every driver so that they can get help when they need it if something goes awry while they're driving. As I said at the beginning, driving is probably one of the most complex and dangerous things that your employees are going to be doing for you. There are definitely certain occupations and certain job duties that are really hazardous, but this is a very common thing that a lot of employees do, and so it's really important for you as employers to think about what's the safest way to equip our employees to do this particular task for us. We definitely want everybody to drive to arrive alive. We don't want to see this kind of outcome when somebody's just trying to get the job done. If you're looking for help, on our website, we do have a driving safety resource page where we've got some guidance. We've got a checklist for people to look at their occupational driving safety program and ask some thought-provoking questions to see if maybe they have some gaps in their program. We've got a lot of resources out there. We link to other primarily governmental resources to help you put your plan together or address a particular issue that you're seeing with your employees. So we welcome you to go to our website or contact us. We'll be happy to help you try to sort through this. It's a big task trying to keep a lot of moving parts, so to speak. Also, if you carry workers' compensation insurance, your insurance company is required to provide accident prevention services to you at no additional charge. So you should be able to find the contact information for obtaining those resources from your insurance carrier on the front of your workers' comp policy. So I've got the Texas Department of Transportation's website here. They have a lot of good driver resources, and you are all familiar with our driving concern resources because you are here participating in this webinar today. So that concludes today's presentation, and I'm glad to answer any questions. If anyone has you can type them into the chat, and I'll be happy to address those. Give you a couple minutes in case we have any slow typists. So here's my contact information. Again, feel free to contact me directly or our safety training phone number that I gave you earlier. We'll be happy to help you with these or any other issues that you have in the workplace. We are going to do another webinar this is a series of webinars, so our next one is going to be next week on March 21st, starting at 1:30. and the title of that is During the Trip, Skills for Avoiding Common Crash Causes. So we're going to look at some of the crash causes that we all often think about, and some of the ones that are less newsworthy but cause just as many crashes, and how drivers can avoid those types of crashes when they're on the road. So we hope you'll join us for that webinar. At the conclusion of this webinar, I believe when Cindy concludes the webinar, it will automatically take you to the Our Driving Concern website where you can register for next week's webinar. Again, I don't see that we have any questions, so I appreciate your time and participation today, and I will turn it back over to Cindy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. If everyone can hear me, I'm going to go ahead and thank our guest, Karen Puckett, for doing her presentation today on the safety issues that we need to be considering before we start our vehicle for a trip. Hopefully this will help employers keep employees safer. We appreciate attendees taking a few minutes to complete the post-event survey. With that, this concludes the webinar. Everybody have a good day and drive safe out there. Thank you.